With the power of the dagger looming, a couple of faithfuls make surprising moves. Call it what you want, the final week, the final lap, the final quarter. Decisions in this episode could end up being pivotal to who, out of the faithfuls and traitors, would eventually take the prize money home. There was no murder, but there was one big question we were all waiting for the answer to. Who did Rachel and Stephen give the ceremonial dagger to? All the talk at breakfast was about the dagger. Faraz and James wanted it. Whoever did get it would have a big weight on their shoulders about where their 2 votes would end up going, though it was clear to everyone that James would vote for Matthew. Claudia announced that the traitors had given James the power of the ceremonial dagger. I thought Claudia would wait until the round table to announce it. I remember one version had put the dagger at the round table, so when everyone walked in, that's when they knew who had the power. In that case, a faithful had the responsibility to give the dagger to another player. The plan from Rachel and Stephen was to use this choice to help get rid of Matthew, the traitorous faithful who wanted to be recruited but spent the time in between trying to get out the ones he thought he made a deal with. From the moment Claudia left, after making the announcement, Matthew was already on the defensive, saying it would be a silly move for a traitor to give it to someone who thinks they're a traitor. Matthew then resumed his accusations against Jade. Then there was Roxy, who has been on James for a while, thinking James had given himself the dagger. Just by watching the breakfast section, it looked like there was going to be faithfuls in the running for banishment in Jade, James and Matthew. What was clear was that if Matthew was going down, he was going down swinging. Matthew did a very interesting thing in front of Stephen in the kitchen, subtly or not so subtly saying that a traitor would probably vote for him. You could see the cogs in Stephen's head turning. Would he still vote for Matthew, or would Matthew's words be in his head so much that Stephen switches and votes elsewhere? In what looked like an abandoned funfair, the players had the displeasure of being strapped to a carousel that would spin at various speeds throughout the mission. Each time the carousel stopped, they would need to run and find a bag of gold hidden around the fairground. They could only go back to the carousel if they found a bag of gold. This was of importance as a chair or 2 were being removed while they were looking for the bags. It was a bit like musical chairs, but not as fun. The last one sat on the carousel at the end of the final round would win the shield. On top of all the spinning that was getting faster with each round, it started raining. I would have been absolutely useless in this mission. The dizziness would have me bump into things and falling over. Sometimes I get dizzy just standing up. Sometimes I bump into things without being dizzy. I could very much see myself needing to be still for a while before getting in the car. Jack was the last one remaining and won the shield. Feeling sick might have been worth it to guarantee himself one more night in the castle. Up to £12,000 could have been won, but in the end £9,250 was added to the prize pot.
Open the penguins! Rip out their heart!
Roxy did the same thing to Rachel as she did to Stephen, asking if she was keeping her in. Her interrogation skills are questionable. I'm not sure what Roxy was expecting, but she was probably too busy crying to see Rachel's facial expression. Faraz joined the club of faithfuls, thinking they're the special one being kept in. Despite wanting to, the traitors can't kill everyone at the same time. There's 8 players, why are these 3 getting on like they're the special one? They never seem to say why are we being kept in the game. If you were playing a traitor's bingo card, this sentence would hands down be crossed off every season. Damn it, I never checked to see if anyone had said I'm voting for yourself. Before the round table, there were names flying all over the place. When speaking to Faraz and Roxy in the car, Matthew said if it's not Jade, it's Rachel and Stephen. Faraz had told Jack he thinks it's Rachel. Despite this, I was still confident it was between Jade or Matthew being banished, with James as an outside bet. I'm glad Jade brought up the family tree picture again. I don't get why that angle hasn't been a factor, other than when Stephen brought it up about Maz many moons ago. They accused Jade because she was defensive and doesn't have an acceptable defense, but not Roxy, even though she was one of the last people seen at the scene of a crime. This is why Jessie found it so hard for anyone to buy into her theory about Stephen, though Fiona's banishment didn't help. They've also seemed to have forgotten that there could have been a traitor on the death row list who was left in the cages. For the most part, Rachel and Stephen were very quiet. It was mostly Jade, James, Matthew and Roxy speaking, though Rachel and Stephen did chime in later. Throughout the episode, I kept thinking it was going to be a Jade versus Matthew vote, but the more James was speaking, the more I thought votes were going to swing in his direction. His play to go in hard against Matthew was starting to make the players confused and look in his direction instead. At this point, I was more certain that Jade would once again survive. I think Jade has used up all of her 9 lives. Jade only received 1 vote from Faraz. Jade surprisingly voted for James instead of Matthew, taking the votes against James to 3. This meant that with 5 votes, Matthew was banished. I can very much see James being banished next. I would be surprised if it didn't happen, but there was something later to come that would have me questioning my thoughts on this. Jack and James once again voted the same way. I am once again asking, why is no one suspicious of Jack? I can't remember anyone saying they're suspicious of him. Jack hasn't even received a single vote. Even Faraz has copped the tiniest amount of heat when Jade mentioned him at the round table, though Faraz also hasn't received a vote. With Jack winning the shield and the possibility of no murder the next night, he's pretty much guaranteed to not only be in the final episode, but be at the Fire of Truth. I would be surprised if he's not. Why do the traitors keep the faithful of all faithfuls in the game? It doesn't work out well for them. The players keep talking about how they have to look at everyone, yet they are not. Even though we know Jack isn't a traitor, the fact he's voted the same way as James would not only raise eyebrows, but would also be dangerous. There's a voting block that is dangerous to both the faithfuls and traitors. One out of Jack or James has to go for anyone else to actually win, though it looks like Jack and Faraz might have a little pact going on. Faraz in front of Jade, Roxy and Stephen said he thinks Rachel is a traitor. Faraz said everything that we know to be true. He made an even bolder move by later saying it to Rachel in front of Jack and James. To me, Faraz telling everyone he thinks Rachel is a traitor and for Rachel not to kill him is the equivalent of Ben saying if he's murdered, Ross did it. If I was a traitor and Rachel was a faithful, I would get rid of Faraz to frame Rachel. It's the perfect setup in the same way Ross was framed. That's the way Rachel could play it if Faraz is murdered. This was a big decision for Rachel and Stephen, a bit like when Stephen needed to decide whether to murder Jesse when she brought up his name again. I wondered if Stephen would have brought up what Faraz had said if Rachel didn't bring it up herself. Rachel said that if Stephen hears that she has said his name, she is just doing it to protect their relationship. She reiterated her promise to him about not writing his name down. At that moment I thought, Stephen is going to betray her. And that was the moment I started truly thinking about the possibility of Stephen winning as a solo traitor. Stephen is silly to think that Rachel wouldn't mention his name ever. It would be suspicious if she didn't, but the way she worded it wasn't the best, and it would get a lot of traitors panicking. Rachel only voted for Hugo, while Stephen voted for both Hugo and Fiona. It looks like things are pointing towards Stephen possibly panicking and betraying Rachel. For me though, I'm not sure I'm feeling as confident about a traitor's win as I was before. This could very well end up being a too faithful win, and it will very much depend on if Faraz is murdered. Due to the fact that there isn't always a murder the night before the final, this could very much end up being the last murder of the season. It makes the decision even more important.